Hiya! Welcome to this, my 77th episode of VideoFuzzy. I'm your host, Terry J. Aman, sifting my basket of media memories, and in this installment, titled A Mighty Wind, that 2003 mockumentary turned up cataloging my classic collection. I have some thoughts. I find I do have all the episodes of The Unusuals in my collection. I make good on a promise. Also, ran into all kinds of music putting this one together. Let's explore. Welcome to the show.
He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy.
Visiting friends over Labor Day was a hoot. Got as far east as Philadelphia, saw nowhere near enough of it, and will absolutely have to get back sometime. Otherwise, staying put for the foreseeable, hoping to make good progress on this project. We'll see how that goes. Oh, and this past weekend I was able to put these thoughts together at the City Brew coffee shop in Bismarck for the first time since last spring. Enjoyed some white mocha praline and some pumpkin bread, listening to some great music, including, according to my Shazam, Higher Power by Coldplay, Love You Most by Laura Jean Anderson, and Wishing Girl by Lola Marsh. Glorious day for it. Fall is the nicest 12 or 13 days we get all year. I'm absolutely going to enjoy it. Cheers. Correction. Error. I should really save these for actual errors, but episode 75 was unclear in calling out what sounded like a misdelivered line from the 20th season finale of The Simpsons. Homer was complaining about foreigners clogging up the system, and Ogdenville Transplant looks up and says, "I hurt my back and clogging your septic system," which context made sense. They're in a hospital waiting room, and the emphasis should totally be on the word your, but more like this. "I hurt my back unclogging your septic system." The parallel is on clogged up systems. Anyway, way I framed it sounded like I could be calling out Julie Carpenter, never on your life. I know it's 33 seasons and counting. I don't believe I've ever heard a misdelivered line from Marge, her mom, or either of her sisters. She's gold. Yeah, new season premiered Sunday, if you can believe it. All the best, guys.
Friday Night Feature.
We start on discs 1188 and 1189, where I archived the Comedy Central presentation of 2003's A Mighty Wind, another of Christopher Guest's screwy, partially scripted ensemble film features, this time focused on folk music. To honor the passing of late folk music manager Irving Steinblum, his family invited his acts, folk music legends, the Folksmen, the New Main Street Singers, and Mitch and Mickey to the Town Hall in New York to perform their hits, remembering folk music from the 50s to the zenith of its popularity in the 60s. Bob Balaban plays Jonathan Steinblum, the very fussy, precise, persnickety son of the late Irving Steinblum, on the phone with the bands within, it could have been hours since the funeral, to fling this gigantic stage production together within 2 weeks. It shouldn't be too hard. All we need is an unbooked, affordable performance space in New York City for a reunion concert of folk bands, some of whom haven't spoken to each other in decades. But the comedy doesn't focus on how haphazard this whole thing is. It's pretty much entirely on the music and its various makers. We see a barbecue reunion of the Folksmen, who all seemed to be available. There was Michael McKean as Jerry Poulter, singing lead, Christopher Guest as tenor Ellen Barrows, and Harry Shearer as bass vocalist Mark Shub. Of the Main Street Singers, we meet the last surviving original member of that perky niftet, George Menschel, played by Paul Dooley, who, together with two other members, stepped away decades ago to open an adult entertainment shop called The Three Wise Men. This seemed like an odd aside, but as we are to learn, there are some directly binding ties between this particular offshoot rebranding of the Main Street Singers and its current iteration, the new Main Street Singers, centered on Jonathan Michael Higgins and Jane Lynch as Terry and Laurie Boner. Both, it would be inaccurate to call them recovered victims of child abuse. Terry's isolation growing up, so enthralled by their music, he crafted them as life-size cardboard cutouts and imagined singing and laughing together with a basement full of loving having supporting friends made out of gin boxes. Lori's experience is perhaps more disturbing, leaving her tiny hometown of Chicago at the age of 15, one of so many children she suspected no one noticed she was absent, made her way to Los Angeles where she did some work with the Three Wise Men Studios, took some small roles in their specialty market films, and she gained some notoriety for her willingness to do things others wouldn't. Oh, that's so long ago now. They got her involved in the New Main Street Singers. She loved to sing, and she met Terry, and they were married. We also meet New Main Street singer Sissy Knox, played by Parker Posey, daughter of original Main Street singer Fred Knox and Rescue from the Streets, who demonstrates folk music for grade schoolers. Wow, is she chipper! At this point, it's sensible to wonder what life is like for the members of that cult. I mean band. The band. Psychedelic Spree. Or rather, the new Fun Dot. I mean the new Main Street Scientologists. That's singers! Holy God, I told you, episode 75, I mentioned this. Sorry about all that. Yes, the new Main Street singers. Generally, I edit that out. Weird. There's an unmistakable hierarchy. Everyone's a little afraid of Terry, who has perfect pitch and uses it to praise or punish the others, depending on how they perform. There's a color palette they follow down to lemon yellow eyeshadow, and some rather unusual clothing choices we learn about as Lori explains their spirituality. They worship an unconventional deity which exists only in her own mind, she said, adding that in their rituals they have witnessed the awesome and vibratory power of color. All of this could have been an excuse to get John Michael Higgins into a hot salmon V-neck sweater, but when the whole crew comes out in bright yellow outfits with cornflower sweater vests, it's certainly eye-catching. They're witches in nature's colors, she says. W-I-N-C. Wink! While winking. And we got a glimpse of them in the studio with their wizard's robes with sparklers, but it's totally not some outlandish belief system, Terry Boner hastens to explain. Humankind is simply materialized color operating on the 49th vibration. You could come to that conclusion walking down the street or going to the store. Here's where I mentioned their new manager, Fred effing Willard. R.I.P. you nutball. Mike LaFontaine, oh wow, the new Main Street Singers manager, they got a winner, reminiscing about his pantsing mid-season replacement sitcom Laugh Riot, Frosted Tips, Pater's Pants, Lotka, Andy Kaufman nonsense, or, oh hey, during the tribute performance to that dead guy, here's a literary reference, maybe have someone throw a great bucket of water from off stage and ladies will be all wet with their tops, and I come out and say, oh, what happened? And everyone laughs. Yeah, just a suggestion, why not? Terry's face at this suggestion is priceless. If there were a burlap sack on set, Mike LaFontaine's head would be in it and beaten with a banjo. That's why not. Stick your literary reference. Before I explore the third act, Mitch and Mickey, there's an undercurrent of tension between the new Main Street Singers and everyone else. Mickey notes with grudging envy that they've got a steady gig in Branson, Missouri, and Michael McKeon as Jerry Poulter complains of their success, that they're so commercial. It feels like sour grapes, but there's something genuinely spiteful coming up later in the show, so I'll circle back. For now, Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara as the America's Sweethearts, Mitch and Mickey. Oh, funny as damn. Their duo formed when Mickey was playing a club with her sister and they were heckled terribly. Mitch, a folk singer himself, moved to defend their honor and was beaten, hospitalized for his trouble. Mickey came to the hospital and brought him a rose and an appreciation. We actually met him when he came to, his jaw wired shut, only able to communicate by writing notes on a notepad, she said. Some of the most beautiful poetry she'd ever read. They started singing together, Mickey said. Truly the first time in her life that she sang. She truly learned to sing with Mitch. And they performed their hit song, Kiss at the End of the Rainbow, on Lee Aikman's Folk Hour, dated 1966. Mitch paused, leaned over, and kissed Mickey during the coda to that number. And we've got Martin Berg. Paul Benedict, as folk music historian Martin Berg, said the significance of that kiss, it cannot be overstated, the significance of that kiss in the history of folk music, or maybe even the history of human beings. Unfortunately, sometime in the early 70s, there was a tragic blow-up, a violent breakup, Mickey going off on Mitch, who apparently snapped and spun off into a terrifyingly dark solo career, and some time, administrator said not enough, in an asylum. He's clearly the weak link in this production. Jonathan, Bob Balaban as Jonathan Steinblum, has been since about the opening scene on the phone with Mitch, begging him to be a part of the tribute concert. And when he appears on screen, he's arrived in Albany on a Greyhound bus. Let's start there. No expense spared, huh? At least the documentary film crew knew where to find him. He, this endearingly vague thing, somehow manages to get to Mickey's lovely home, which she shares with her husband, model train enthusiast and bladder management expert Leonard Crabb. The Mitch we meet 30 years post their breakup is hard to read. It's immediately clear from her interview that Mickey has much fonder memories of their time together than he did. That upon any reflection at all, she realizes she's actually kind of stepped in it. That they haven't spoken in decades, and for reasons. And wow, there's not a lot of room for interpretation when his solo projects, A Cry for Help and Calling It Quits, included such songs as If I Had a Gun, Anyone But You, and May She Rot in Hell. He's much mellower now, Mitch, but also nebulous and vague, really the after-picture for Electroshock. There's this on-screen, off-screen thing that's happening with Mitch. Whenever we see him, generally in rehearsal, he's engaged, present, prepping for a show. Off-screen Mitch is doubtful, confused, kind of a diva. There's one point where we see Mitch in his hotel room with a guitar, alone except for the documentarian, which would be fun to know what Mitch thought of that, but otherwise alone with a guitar in his no-tell motel, regretting this trip and his new best friends, the couple in the adjoining room, and the unbridled romance they got underway there. Mitch is pretty sure he remembers what's going on with that, or at least politely stops composing his new hit song, Going Home, so as they can hear themselves breaking all the way through their headboard there. Jeez. Mitch talks to Jonathan about the concern he's got that the audience will be expecting to see someone from the past, a man who no longer exists. Damn it, it's the best, it's the strongest characterization of this whole movie, this broken doll of a man on the floor, but holy Christ, it all takes place out of shot. When he's working with Mickey, when he's talking to Jonathan, he's fearful but accommodating, odd but present and totally capable of putting on a show. Every time he's determined to call it off, that he's being some kind of unreasonable diva, there's no cameras. It's like that cartoon frog. No less a mystery for all we never learn exactly what it was that set Mickey storming off in a huff into the arms of a bloodless sales rep for urological supplies and model train enthusiast Leonard Crabb. At one point, alone with the documentarian, Mitch did cop to calming pre-show jitters via sex with random fans and hotel staff, but there's never anything definitive, no. So we've got the groups, we've got the new Main Street singers, and driven professionals never stopped working, wholesome but decidedly odd. We get the Folksmen, and they're prepping a show for 1963 when people knew who they were and might indeed put up with, say, Skeletons of Quinto, a joyless deep cut featuring competing spoken word passages in English and Spanish. Mitch is still trapped inside his own head, and wow, it's just too unavailable. The mystery unresolved. Whatever the hell happened between Mitch and Mickey, the film is content to keep us guessing. Harder to believe he'd be able to find the words or recapture energy he no longer feels across from a woman he feels has betrayed him, broken him, built a life with Leonard Crabb, button-down urinary fabulous, train spotty, and active embarrassment to his wife. Contrast with, as she's singing with Mitch, Mickey's face is relaxed, her smiles and laughter come easily. He's unwilling or unable to kiss her during the rehearsals together, and her sadness at this is abject. So, again, flip side of the same coin, what the heck happened with Mickey? She went off on Mitch in the studio that night. She shares a realization early in the piece. I've made a terrible mistake. But seriously, you can apply that to the last 30 years of your life. What happened? Indeed, Mike. The band's signed, the venue booked. Jonathan Steinblum approaches public television people in New York who are over the friggin' moon at folk music, and dozens of fans might actually tune in. It's got Ed Bickley Jr.'s network president Lars Olfen verklempt. He was real musical growing up, his character, and maybe we've heard his hit Hoe de Legget Vliederkomen or How's It Hangin' Grandma, which, oh wow, huge on the Swedish charts. Him and ABBA. We've got the deputy mayor declaring the day of the performance Folk Music Day in New York, which, God, I'm sure all kinds of people noticed. Equipment is arriving, the stage is getting set for the production. Lars is in the production room telling the director about the importance of close-ups, and I will say that while Jonathan was a fussy little detail-oriented persnickamagosh as the stage took shape for the production, I'm not a violent person, but it leads to one of the most satisfying moments in the show, when Jonathan was pestering stage manager Larry about eye-level floral arrangements, and the mic stands should have mics on them. These set pieces are flat, and are those lights up there? Are they safe? Larry's finally had enough and swats the top of John's head like a Family Feud buzzer. It's just, timing-wise, energy-wise, the funniest thing that could have happened. The event couldn't have had a better turnout. Seriously packed house, and Jonathan was almost acceptable as an MC, but I mentioned actual spite back there. The folksmen are downstairs rehearsing their opening number and never did no wandering when they hear it coming over the overhead speaker. New Main Street singers are on stage doing it. Yeah, that's dark. It's spiteful. And no friggin' way Terry and Laurie didn't know that the folksmen would be including one of their biggest hits in their set. Leave the folksmen scrambling to ready something else to open with. But there's never actually consequences for this transgression, and that's unfortunate. They take the high road. In the moment when the New Main Street singers are coming off, the folksmen are going on. Terry asks Michael McKean, Jerry, how they sounded. We can never tell from out there. Did we sound okay? And there's this edge to his question that Jerry blunts with, oh, we didn't hear. We were downstairs with no idea. Downstairs, listening to them, Jerry had complained that they were butchering the song. The only actual consequence is that the folksmen skipped performing it in their set. They took the stage with another folksman standard, Old Joe's Place, and did just fine. Then, obviously, any real conflict between those two bands and its resolution would detract from the real drama of the piece, which is Mitch wandering off during the opening act to get some air. A camera follows him outside to a small shop across the way, and he's looking at postcards, being his typically unreadable self. Backstage, Mickey is getting frantic, wondering if anyone's seen him, how no one went with him. The folksmen are finishing up their act, and Mitch is nowhere to be found. It's a live show. Jonathan tells them to stay up there and fill time, and they gamely stay out there and riff, laying in long, complicated backstory for that moody, unlistenable Spanish Civil War dirge I mentioned, the skeletons of Quinto. Meanwhile, Mickey is losing her mind. Oh my God, I knew it! He's ruined everything all over again! How selfish can anyone be? When, seriously, he steps in from just out of shot and hands her a rose. I wanted to find a good one. She is silent, touched, overwhelmed, and just as the folksmen are about to bust out the skeletons, a stagehand runs out and whispers, "Get off!" and "Good night, everyone!" Mitch and Mickey step out and perform Kiss at the End of the Rainbow, and both groups run upstairs and gather in the wings and watch, taking bets on will they or won't they. The performance is beautiful, heartfelt. Audience members are welling up, listening to it, and as the fateful moment arrives, Mickey looks up. Mitch leans over and gives her a tender kiss. Oh, what a release, this kiss, whose importance to now human civilization, the very laws of thermodynamics themselves, it would be impossible to overstate. Wild applause on into the final number, the title song of the piece, A Mighty Wind. This is something of a surprise, because we never hear any of the groups rehearsing it, which that showed enormous restraint on the part of these fictional documentarians. The fun we'd have in witnessing unreadiness transform over the course of 2 weeks into a full production. Despite the difficulty in reading Mitch throughout, the disappointing lack of confrontation between the New Main Street singers and actual wronged parties like the folksmen, this song pulls everything we've watched for the past hour or so into a lovely tribute to their late manager. A mighty wind is blowing, it's kicking up the sand. It's blowing out a message to every woman, child, and man. Some mighty winds are blowing across the land and across the sea. It's blowing peace and freedom, it's blowing equality, and it's blowing you and me, which now I really cannot not hear it break like the wind from This Is Spinal Tap, another Christopher Guest production, or really not much variation from Old Joe's Place, but whatever. It's a great finale, framed by some clips of where they are now. Yes, Fred, pitching primetime television production starring a folk troupe from the 70s. Of course. And Mickey's crafting dour bladder management dirges for urine cons. She's a musician again. You hear in her voice and we see it in her face. How thrilling is this life she has with Leonard Crabbe, model train splainer and penis clamshell extraordinaire. And to be confusing for the editors because Mitch is writing again, and elusive as lucidity tends to be for this man, seemed to understand that the show was just that, a show, theatrics. Mickey said her sister in the audience took it for real that Mickey'd been leading Mitch on. She insisted no, she was not, that it's never been more fulfilled, but of the two of them, Mitch seems to be the more genuinely happy. And after repeatedly dismissing the new Main Street Singers as commercial sellouts, the Folksmen were touring again. We see them playing a casino somewhere, a bit of a shift in the lineup as Harry Shearer's Mark Shub starts living her truth, identifying as female, though I didn't catch her name. Fully supported by her fellow Folksmen, she seems genuinely happy, having shaved her beard and added a blonde wig, dressed in something off a couch. She still sings alto profundo, and the group now looking like nothing so much as Peter, Paul, and Mary. Fun show. I had comments on the songs, but it's worth tracking this show down and enjoying them directly. IMDb said the troupe took the Grammy for Best Song Written for a Screenplay, the title work A Mighty Wind, and Kissed at the End of the Rainbow was up for the Oscar. I'll just say it's really easy to see whose work is being spoofed in each of these acts, and while the songs were parody encapsulations of the energy of the day as specific groups and songs, they're pretty good songs and performances unto themselves. I had no trouble seeing how these acts would have had a following, which, again, I think contributed to the comedy. Yes, they're a little precious. Yes, folk music gave voice to those protesting injustice, war, and segregation, but some hard-to-ignore, smug, self-important detachment, just saturated in humility, and it's kind of impossible to ignore a general lack of representation reflected in, most of this cast. Reference-wise, Arlo Guthrie's Alice's Restaurant is about the war and the draft. Old Joe's Place is not. Well, there's a puppy in the parlor and a skillet on the stove and a smelly old blanket and enough wove. There's chicken on the table, but you gotta say grace. There's always something cooking at Old Joe's Place. It's clever patter, engaging. It's good poetry brings in all the senses, though I'd say the cleanliness of the blanket probably has more to do with the puppy than whoever made it, but whatever. The weirdness actually begins in the opening line. Whenever I'm out wandering, chased a rainbow dream, I often stop and think about a place I've never seen. And the one that really caught my ear was Never Did No Wanderin', which gives a lie to Old Joe's opening lyric, but we got My mother was the cold north wind, my father was the son of a railroad man from the west of hell where the trains don't even run. The whole rest of the song was random never have I ever word association about all the traveling the singer has never done, which, while evocative, falls a little. The real fun there was the 2 solid weeks of rehearsals culminating in the new Main Street Singers taking the stage ahead of them and infringing on their copyright on live television. They're, piggybacking on the Oceanic satellite signal. They're yet national television. I suppose it's a thing that has happened. Homage, tribute, sincerest form of flattery and all that. Weird, given how organized Jonathan Sandblom concerned he is about set pieces and mic stands, and what the bands were planning on performing just left that to chance, and the big group sing at the end. Some of these people haven't been on stage together in decades. One of them was no guarantee he was going to be on stage at all, but yeah, they'll figure it out. And while I'd say the film is a perfectly good showcase for most of the songs, plenty good enough for most, the one that it stomps unforgivably is the new Main Street Singers' Potatoes in the Paddy Wagon, which is one of those great mid-century storytellers. I found a performance cut on YouTube that looks to be a home-recorded DVD extra. I also appreciated the performance cut of A Kiss at the End of the Rainbow, which lets the song be its own thing rather than a plot point. I'll include those links in my show notes. Cross Connection. There are so many delightful cross connections to point to in A Mighty Wind, not least of which Jane Lynch and Jonathan Michael Higgins, Harry Shearer, obviously solid ties to The Simpsons. Jane in Glee just found where I'd archived the pilot episode of that romp not too long ago, and along with his appearance in Community, Ralph and I got Jonathan Michael Higgins on our screens all the time with Game Show Network production of America Says. I've enjoyed every one of these Christopher Guest productions that I've encountered. This is Spinal Tap, Waiting for Guffman, A Mighty Wind, Best in Show, For Your Consideration. All of these are so much fun, but for A Mighty Wind, easy track for my Studio 6 Feet Under challenge. No one's more than a step away via Ed Bigley Jr.'s involvement in 6 Feet Under. But I wanted to highlight Michael McKean for my golden thread this time. Golden thread. Well, there's a few reasons I'll get into here, but I became aware of him in one of Happy Days' dozens of spin-offs, Laverne and Shirley, and thinking about it between Lenny and Squiggy and then Schneider on One Day at a Time kind of normalized strange men invading women's spaces uninvited. They'd burst in without knocking and the canned laughter would go nuts because that's hilarious. The contribution to rape culture is as incalculable as it is troubling. But back to me scrolling through IMDb for shows I watched and also appearances throughout my collection. Michael McKean, totally watched him as Lenny in Laverne and Shirley. Pretty sure I have this as Spinal Tap in here somewhere. I know I've got Clue in my current collection. He was in Jumpin' Jack Flash, Coneheads in here somewhere. Wow, he made a lot of appearances as David St. Hubbins. I friggin' loved him as cheeky band director Rick Rochester in Radioland Murders. He was Cece's brother, Professor Noel Babcock, in the 3rd season episode of The Nanny. Then appearances I almost certainly caught in Friends, Star Trek Voyager, and Caroline in the City, and maybe The X-Files. Probably saw him with Bob Odenkirk in Mr. Show. I'm certain I saw him in Best in Show. That's probably in here somewhere. Just spent 20 minutes talking about A Mighty Wind, and just, wow, funny as damn. Martin Short's primetime glick band director and harpist extraordinaire Adrian Van Voorhees. Just, that whole production, seriously cannot wait for that to come into view. He was in Boston Legal, he was in the Producers remake I've got For Your Consideration in here somewhere, he was in Castle, he was in Happy Endings, he made my current collection as Doug Fawcett in The Good Place, and again with Bob Odenkirk in Better Call Saul as Charles McGill. Built just breathtaking character on that show. And throughout his career, he's done a ton of voice work, whether I encountered it or not. I certainly watched Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, Family Guy, American Dad, Rugrats. He's had a long and brilliant career playing about 3 characters. No, that is not a fair assessment at all. You get Michael McKean in front of a camera, you keep him there long enough, you will be shown a complete person. He'll bring depth to any story. I actually found myself examining my memories of his work on Primetime Glick, and character he created for that show wouldn't have had to be anything at all, but there was depth there. Same with Rick Rochester. He finds a story and a way to tell it, which has certainly contributed to his long and successful career. I love him wherever I see him. Now on VideoFuzzy, a fond reflection. Normally I add fond reflections at this point, so I'll start with a late one, bidding farewell to the other half of Lenny and Squiggy, David L. Lander, who passed in 2020. I admit this cataloging effort was the first I'd thought of him in years, his turning up as he did on disc 1197 in the scrap of The Simpsons season 14 episode Helter Shelter, talking in his sleep. I learned from my search on IMDb that he died last December. I do not know how much David L. Lander I actually have in my collection, but in exploring the question, I found an appearance in Val's Apartment, a 3rd season episode of The Nanny, which was a lot of fun. I want to thank my husband again for buying me a complete series box set. I was able to pull up the episode and watch it. Nanny finds friend Val wants to rent her own apartment, but rents are insane, so they go halvesies on what turns out to be a garden-level apartment, similar in all ways to that of Laverne and Shirley, except for being in Queens and not not Milwaukee. That detail firmly to the shut up. They enter on an uncertain rendering of the girls' Schlemiel, Schlemazel chant, and there's a bit of pantsing about when, with a sweep of leopard print smoking jacket, the landlord enters unannounced with his trademark, "Hello!" Val had been so excited by all the single men in the building, and turns out that's by design. They're all gay. The appearance out in an alternate reality Lenny and Squiggy, with him sharing the landlording duties with his significant other Leonard, and as of 1995 they'd been together for 17 years, so that's just math. And just 3 episodes before, Michael McKean had appeared as Cece's brother Noel. Noel won a bet with Cece by getting Fran on an episode of Jeopardy, which, oh, my heart, Alex Trebek. My very warmest wishes to Mayim and Ken for stepping in for the rest of 2021, and hashtag PickLevar. But the proximity of those episodes naturally got me wondering if that's when they reached out to David L. Lander to do a Fran and Val homage to Laverne and Shirley. David swishing into their new apartment, and no person watching the show would miss the reference, but the fact that those two guests appeared within a month of each other, and how the episode felt more than usually flung together. Drescher said she modeled her approach to the nanny on Lucille Ball's I Love Lucy and made a point of celebrating past sitcoms. Director for both episodes, and indeed more than 70 others, was Dorothy Lyman, who played the completely out-of-hand Naomi on Mama's Family. There are lots of touching off points to draw on in making this homage. The landlord never gave us his name. He hardly needed to. Thank you for that blast from the past. Now, stop bursting into tenants' homes unannounced. In other fond reflections, also late, I actually mentioned Hearts of Fire last time. I failed to give a shout-out to Marky Post, her character wed to John Ritters on that show, and working with Leslie Jordan. Bloodworth Thomason production about a left-wingy couple helming a small-town newspaper. Fresh from 9 seasons of Night Court, I enjoyed the world lost a light there. I loved her voice, I loved her work, her energy, and her attitude. I'm not sure I've actually got Hearts of Fire in my collection, but I for sure watched it. Oh, and appearing as her dad in that piece, fond reflection the third here for this episode, Ed Asner. Loved him, as did the universe in Up. Loved him as Lou Grant, Mary's boss, and to a lesser extent his move to print journalism. He's got more than 400 acting credits on IMDb and a lot of stuff I watched, but probably most recently one of the power brokers controlling the mayor's office in Briar Patch, which I highlighted as a ridiculous conceit in my review of it, but for sure he was completely believable, no question. The man is a light and a presence. Finally, wow, Norm Macdonald, the Colonel himself, so much more than his KFC commercials, obviously. That's just the most recent thing I've seen him in, and as far as I can swear to it, probably News Radio, the Drew Carey show, My Name is Earl, but this is the second time I've run into a Man in the Moon reference in putting this together, and it makes me really hopeful I've got that somewhere. I know I've got the video for R.E.M's Man on the Moon somewhere. I loved him on Saturday Night Live, can't always say that, and I know I've seen him in things here and there over the years. He always had a fun take on life, a knack for getting you to see things from a different point of view. A real what you see is what you get performer. Safe journeys all.
Diving into my classic collection.
Turning to my classic VHS-to-DVD transfers, in episode 74 with my Pride Night feature on Noah Hawley's New York cop dramedy The Unusuals, I highlighted the voiceover work by the unseen character of the Dispatcher, voiced by Marisa Vural, and said once I got through all the episodes in my archive I'd share some of her best stuff. Well, as of this cataloging, disc 1199, I have encountered, as it happens, all 10 episodes of The Unusuals, and I was able to find, I think, practically all of Dispatcher's announcements and observations. And what luck, most of them were worth sharing, so, as promised, Dispatch?
Second Squad, this is Dispatch. Be on the lookout for a man in a hot dog costume, last seen running west on Houston Street. Suspect may or may not be wielding a samurai sword. Second Squad, this is Dispatch. Be on the lookout for a Puerto Rican male wearing a cape and no pants. Second Squad, be advised, Dispatch is cranky today and will be accepting no gup or lip from anyone. All personnel be advised, female restrooms offer female personnel only. Second Squad, be advised, possible 10-11 at Delancey and Allen. Suspects are elderly twins in matching pink and white sweaters. Second Squad, this is Dispatch. Be on the lookout for a ninja or a ninja-like figure last seen outside the Essex Market.
That was all from the pilot episode. Part of the fun was these suspects she announced would later appear in police custody, so the show used the character to craft bite-sized little comic through lines. Later, when you saw a man in a hot dog costume in a holding cell or a little old lady twins in matching sweaters going in for processing, they were part of the weirdness, but not just out of nowhere random either. Let's keep going.
Second squad, this is Dispatch. Are you sitting down?
Bam! A giant boot comes down from the sky and crushes a car. Turns out it's a model display at a bank, crushed during a bank robbery in progress, but the illusion was fantastic. Continuing.
Second squad, 10:31 in progress at Madeline's dress shop in Essex. Dispatch respectfully reminds all responding officers that she is a size 2. Second squad, this is Dispatch. Do you ever feel like you're the last person on Earth yelling into the void, "Hello? What's it gonna take to get some Mushu?" Second squad, be advised, female trapped in a porta potty on East River Park. This perfectly summarizes my last relationship. Second squad, possible 1010 in Mike's Meat Warehouse, but more importantly, what is it about me that scares men away?
Oh, this one may be familiar.
Aloha, Second Squad. Be advised that Dispatch is declaring Friday Hawaiian Shirt Day, because yeah, that's the kind of power I wield.
Oh, I'll see if I can do this next one justice.
Second Squad, this is Dispatch sending out a very special dedication to a very special someone.
Hubba hubba. Moving on.
Second Squad, this is Dispatch. A reminder, today is Crime Awareness Day, tomorrow is Crime Avoidance Day, Thursday is Sloppy Joe Day. Second Squad, this is Dispatch. Be advised the domestic dispute at Irvington and Allen is now coming back as Seventh Limb.
Oh, that was dark. Oh, and about here's where I noticed that people watching with captions on got additional comedy.
Good morning, Second Squad. 1067 at Avenue A in Houston. Student drivers successfully learned how to drive on the sidewalk.
And then closed captions continue the announcement.
Also, be advised, Dispatch is feeling frisky this morning. Proceed with caution.
And sadly, this one appeared as closed captions only, so approximating.
Notice to all units responding to the disturbance at Big Top's Go-Go Bar, no more officers are needed at the scene. I repeat, no more officers are needed at the scene.
I'm so glad I turned captions on for this effort.
Second Squad, this is Dispatch. It's a full moon tonight, people. You know what that means. Anything can happen. Zombies, succubi, giant robots fighting in the streets. Proceed with caution. Second Squad, this is Dispatch. Please be advised at the intersection of Houston and Orchard, two schizophrenic men may or may not be arguing with each other. Good morning, Second Squad. 1011 in progress on Carmine and Orchard, where Dispatch had the worst date of her life with Bonnie DiNoblio's cousin, Ricky. Ricky, wherever you are, this one's for you. Second Squad, this is Dispatch, reminding you that handcuffs are for official police business only. Second Squad, be advised, a man dressed as a panda robbing Frank's Minimart. Suspect is considered armed and adorable. All units, robbery in progress at the Spandex factory. Suspect is either a transvestite or a handsome woman with large hands.
And closing out this particular treasure hunt.
All units, disturbance on Avenue B. A shirtless man is swinging a dead pig at his wife in a threatening manner. Why are all the good ones swinging a dead pig or gay?
Not from personal experience, but that last one isn't an either or. At least as exciting as the quotes themselves, to me at least, is the proof of concept they represent. This segment represents the very first search I conducted via e-reader. My folks got me a first-generation e-reader probably a dozen years or so ago now. It's black and white, LCD if you can imagine. Definitely at the we're still figuring this out but want to get this on the market stage of e-reader technology. It has Wi-Fi and that's adorable. It also now has a PDF file with a searchable version of my entire classic collection as of disc 1200, which, as of this cataloging effort, is where I've gotten to. This is a big deal for me. Before a week ago, I wasn't sure this functionality would even be available, or I'd need to buy a new mini SD card to transfer the information, and so on. As I connected my NUC to my PC for the first time ever via USB, my computer seemed to be trying to figure out how to even talk to the thing. Explorer found 4 user-accessible folders, including one called Documents. I saved a text file. It came up as a blank document with a big question mark on it. I gargled file accessibility for Nooks and found some discussion of PDF availability, so I tried it again with a PDF. This came up on my Nook as a file I could open and search, but the copy was terribly small. I tried again with a larger font, which was somewhat better. What I'm ultimately going to have to do is make the page size more compatible with my Nook, which is a big one-time project I'll take on at the end of this process. After all, numerically at least, I'm nearly halfway through compiling this catalog. In the meantime, it was functional to the point where I'd entered my search term, the unusuals, and after some hunting about, it took a bit of time, and you could certainly see the work it was putting in. My Nook displayed all 10 episode titles, along with which discs they were on. I pulled them from my collection, loaded them up, and watched them. And while listening for our tireless dispatch, I got to enjoy this show again from the beginning. Oh, I saw where I'd gotten a few details wrong in my discussion episode titled 42, but that'll happen. Even watching Harper's Island from the beginning and taking notes, I see I'd forgotten several key subsequent reveals I'll revisit at some future point, but that's neither here nor there. Dispatch, as I mentioned up there, would tell the team to be on the lookout for some crazy character. They'd later appear in the background as the cops pulled them in for this or that. She'd lay in some tone for the episode or share an unlooked-for peek into her personal life. It was a fun bit. I loved her accent and her attitude. Plus, having watched Fran Drescher and The Nanny for that other thing, it was really fun listening to that unvarnished New Yorker accent. So, yep,
Dispatcher signing out.
and for sure, once I'm done with this project, I'm excited that it'll be independently searchable without having to fire up my PC every time I want to find something. Some comments on revisiting the series. In the 6th episode, The Circle Line, we got Jeremy Renner as hero of the piece, Detective Walsh, comforting a ball-busting, third-person expressing Lieutenant Burns of the piece, Detective Eddie Alvarez, for getting it wrong about an alcoholic cop who, while off-duty, was framed for the murder of a bartender's ex. Bartender roofied their drinks, followed them to the hotel, and murdered his ex-girlfriend with the butt of the cop's gun. Cop comes to Walsh asking for help. Walsh tracks down the evidence that exonerates him, but when talking to Eddie, says, "New rule, cops first, because guys who do what we do deserve a little room, a little slack. I'm not talking about corruption, just if a guy gets in trouble, you do what it takes to help him out, because you know he'll do the same for you. It's called a family." It's so hard to hear that line in the context of especially the last 6 years, but I will say I'm so happy for cell phones that record video, and that's all I'm going to say about that. It is weird that someone as ambitious and attuned to office politics as Eddie Alvarez is as dense as he's written while working within this reality, but it does help make him a ridiculous character, and Malolios do make for easy devices for advancing a plot. I mentioned Harper's Island up there, and I have just been holding back from busting out new favorite music I've been encountering while cataloging these shows. A piece that played over a significant reveal in that series was Letters from the Sky by Civil Twilight, a single released in 2010, but I'll include the link in my show notes. Really a most extraordinary song. Atmospheric, really beautiful. I don't know how I missed it the first time around, but I absolutely added it to my iTunes. And going through the unusuals, I did not add this one, but I enjoyed Metal Heart by Cat Power, which was a moody, ethereal piece with a contemplative piano line and sad, reflective lyrics playing over Adam Goldberg as Detective Eric Delahoy, tracking a man's quest to recapture the brief moments of happiness he experienced in his life prior to his parents dying in a car accident when he was 8. Wow, this music was well chosen. Also in episode 9, The Apology Line, they paired a chase sequence with Taylor Mendy's Bollywood-flavored Tune from 1998. The song was a bold, strong choice. It rocked a decade after its release. It still rocks 2 decades after its release. I loved it. I loved the video. And on disc 1184, end of 2nd season In Plain Sight, episode 9, Who's Bugging Mary, we got Mary Chapin Carpenter singing Closer and Closer Apart, which, never mind now, I added to my collection when I first heard it back in 2009 as absolutely beautiful exploration. Music direction in the late aughts was paired with iTunes and streaming services, which probably made it more directly profitable for artists to license their work for use on TV shows. A lot of Grey's Anatomy from the era highlighted songs used in the show in their closing credits and where to look for it. Oh, and on discs 1177 and 1195, in Coma post his kidney transplant surgery. We got Stephen Pasquale as Sean Garrity in Rescue Me, contemplating his recovery by way of golden age of Hollywood song and dance numbers, which was, hilarious, but man is talented. Together with the highlights I included in episode 76, I feel like this stretch of cataloging has been great for discovering some fun music. Indeed, on disc 1197, I found the third season premiere of The Simpsons, titled Stark Raving Dad, which is fantastic. Homer is committed to an insane asylum for wearing a pink shirt to work and meets Michael Jackson in the person of Leon Kompowski. My credits cut out at the end, but IMDb informs me he was credited as John J. Smith. The song Happy Birthday Lisa just makes me smile. I've elsewhere grimaced over the difficulties in separating artist from art, but the fact that this episode has been pulled from the Disney Plus streaming platform is another reason I'm happy to have this archive. Counting on hosting services for one's media leaves availability to the whims of licensing and multi-billion-dollar corporations, which at the very least is unreliable. Speaking of which, this whole next observation springs from about 1.5 seconds of recording on disc 1176, but here goes. I find that sometime during its second season I started recording episodes of The Big Bang Theory. The impetus to hit record may have been Kelly Cuoco as Penny singing Soft Kitty to Jim Parsons as Sheldon, but why ever I started I've been encountering the production, which, as far as I know, invariably ended with a title card from Chuck Lorre. I've been encountering the production, which, as far as I know, invariably ended with a title card from Chuck Lorre. End of the work song Nanocluster, I believe, where Penny roped the boys into mass producing and selling homemade hair clips, my attention was grabbed by a reference to Grace Under Fire, which I sort of remembered. I remember truly enjoying Brett Butler in the title role, and I read through the clip. Chuck has put together a drift down memory lane he titled More of Not Funny Then, where he remembered misadventures with productions he'd been a part of, including a stint as a writer on Roseanne and his experiences creating and running Grace Under Fire. All he says about that is, I create Grace Under Fire and realize what I'm in for and try to quit after the pilot is picked up. Then again at Christmas, and then a terrible earthquake hits and he prays for the set to collapse. Of both he remarks, not funny then, funny now. The third part is the kicker. He develops a new series starring Sybil Shepherd, which he says is an instant hit. Sybil came to him and asked him to fire Lee Aronson because he is a misogynist. Chuck says she's not wrong, but jokingly tells her, why do you care? You're not a woman, which got them both fired. He recalls the situation as not funny then and not funny now. True enough. I'm looking at all three as successful productions with strong women in the title roles. Roseanne premiered in 1988, Grace Under Fire premiered in 1993, and Sybil premiered in 1995. Chuck was involved in varying capacities, but what stands out in these three instances is the darkness. He characterized Roseanne as a show that fired all its writers, and Grace Under Fire as a show he could not get in his rear view fast enough. What stands out most to me is that these are all shows helmed with strong female leads, title characters all, and Chuck highlights the negativity, especially as regards Sybil. I've loved Sybil Shepherd everywhere I've encountered her, and Moonlighting, Chances Are, Sybil, Criminal Minds, that Martha Stewart hit piece they ran a few years ago, Sean's Mom in Psych. I mean, she's a towering, phenomenal talent, sure, but even back in the 90s, when expectations of decent behavior were much lower, comes to her producer, says, fire this misogynist, and gets 2 barrels of testosterone blasted in her face. It's that he's sharing it now in 1.5 seconds of screen time. Well, I say now, it aired in March of 2009. He's recounting it lately, jokingly. Can't this Sybil Shepherd superstar take a silly joke? Per Wikipedia, the hashtag #MeToo movement traces its roots in this context to a MySpace posting in 2006, but gained international momentum in 2017. As of 2009, Hollywood types were starting to be aware of pushback, which, yeah, for sure, for the 90s, is kind of nonsense. What do you care? You're not a woman. Women have had to put up with so much more for so much longer than this, and in that they've made the advances that they have and gained access to increasingly level playing fields that we can even have the conversations we're having. At least in this instance, it sounded like she fired 2 misogynists, and I'd have to call that a good start. Oh, and Chuck? I'd say it's a little funny now. Another highlight from my classic collection that seems a little bit topical, on disc 1179, I've got Jon Stewart debating morality with former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee on The Daily Show. Seriously, sitting there listening to Huckabee talk about abortion and equating it to euthanasia. John put up his, as usual, adept and spirited redirect, but by the end of the interview it kind of stood out to me that neither of these people would ever face an unwanted pregnancy, never in their life could have, and the disgusting, adamantium-fisted control Huck felt privileged to exert in situations that could not and could never have a personal impact on his life whatsoever, because abstract maybes ignore the real pain that real people experience with, let's start here, guilt ascribed to miscarriages, people dying in pregnancy, miscarriage, and childbirth, children giving birth to half-siblings or cousins, or kept, then abandoned, fostered, or adopted, feeling or being rejected, unloved, unwanted, abused, and neglected. It's gross, and people had ought to mind their own when they will not be contributing to household expenses, except then to rail against how burdensome they are on the state. Then, on disc 1182, I archived Obama answering questions from a town hall in the White House, and ABC Primetime Questions for the President, Prescription for America. It was the President taking healthcare questions in town hall format. A title card came up saying the U.S. had spent the most in the world on healthcare, but ranked 36th in life expectancy. I pulled it up. This year, that dropped 47th, which was sad, and I'm certain we're not spending any less on healthcare than we were in 2009. Worldwide, numbers continue to trend upwards, however. According to UN figures, both men and women's life expectancy increasing on average from 47 years in 1950 to 73 years in 2020, which is absolutely jaw-dropping in that span of time. World population more than tripled over the same period, from 2.5 billion to 7.7 billion. That's more than 5 billion more people, and we're all living longer while farmers are trying to feed us all and reduce carbon emissions. I'm kind of stuck on the point where the planet's population has tripled within a single person's lifetime, and that 2 billion of us live in China and India, and then add U.S. life expectancy barely in the top 50 despite the most egregious concentration of resources. You've simply got to be kidding me. Last year we saw on our screens milk discarded, food rotting in the fields, and as a North Dakotan, I'm gobsmacked. All 7.7 billion of us need food. All 7.7 billion of us want better for our families. Any resources stripped off for war or hatred or religious zealotry or racism or division of any sort is mismanaged. With these numbers, we have got to figure out how to work together and help each other. Sorry, rabbit hole, but yeah, that figure, cited when Obamacare was still in the discussion stage, put up against the lurchy compromise we ended up with. I mean, I'm glad people have greater access to care, but I noticed that for the 6 weeks I was unemployed, the only coverage options available to me were not affordable. So, yeah, scary. On disc 1184, I sat down to enjoy a bit of context in the Doctor Who Christmas special, The Next Doctor, which, in a cylinder called an info stamp, showed us the former Doctors absent John Hurt, absent everyone the Doc was prior to William Hartnell, and this line, "Vast swaths of my life have been stolen away. Oh, Jackson Lake, sir, what a large truth you tell with such small words." Another parallel with the close of Season 12, the Cyber King, as presented by Miss Hartigan, is the sort of emotional interface with cyber programming, also explored with Sasha Dowan, transformed as the Master's essence, merged with an entirely mecha cyberlord. It's a stretch to attribute the seeds of these storylines to this Russell T. Davies script, but you can hardly argue that they came completely out of nowhere. That said, I was heartened to learn that Davies would be returning to run the next season but one for the 60th year anniversary. I had my quibbles when the machine, just for one, the machine in End of Time rewrote us all as Gallifreyans. How would or could we ever have been able to revert to ourselves? Or, okay, two, if it can rewrite humans, how would it have skipped over the Vinvoce agents? Or, indeed, koala bears? And what about that sentient paving stone and 11 monsters with a virile sex life? But I digress. He has been responsible for some of the strongest, more consistent writing in the series reboot. And as you can see, that's not saying all that much. One seeks in vain for internal consistency in this series. series, but I feel like if it's remotely possible, he's probably got the best shot at finding it. LLZ!
Checking out my current collection.
So many other just fun observations this time. You can check them all out in my blog entry, but moving with any luck at all a little more quickly along through my current direct-to-DVD collection, I wanted to, wow, seriously, I've been writing this so long, I've built up a couple of weeks' worth of SurrealEstate, but what I have seen through, like, episode 8, the show is so good. I mean, it's not The Magician's good, but it's way better than Vagabond Queen, and most things I've seen on Sci-Fi, actually, so yeah, track it down. I watched and recorded a bunch of stuff before we left on vacation, so that's about a month ago now, including some movies on FXM Retro, like Kidco from 1983, which, wow, it was like Little House on the Prairie writing and acting jumped to the big screen. I mean, Kidco starred, aw shucks, adorable, largely unsupervised grade schooler entrepreneurs living Ayn Rand's dream of adding value to horse pucky and selling it as fertilizer, which, as a no-overhead enterprise based entirely on child labor, deeply undercut their competitors, which the mean old men of the county tax authority put the kibosh, represented before the court by Sally Field's brother from Brothers and Sisters, but a long time ago. Movie insisted that this was a real story, but the writing was so hopelessly broad it's possible the kids also wrote it. Better from that era, I don't think I've ever actually seen this since I saw it at the age of 10 in theaters with my family, but 9 to 5, starring Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, and Dolly Parton, harassed by Dabney Coleman as sexist, egotistical, lying, hypocritical bigot Frank Hart Jr. It doesn't hold up perfectly, but it is an entertaining romp. It makes me interested in tracking down another piece I love from that part of my history, which was Lily and Bette Midler in Big Business, another one I haven't seen in forever, like All of Me or Outrageous Fortune. Looking forward to finding those in here if they turn up. The goofy one, since this episode has had kind of a musical theme, was Pat Boone and schlock horror comedy The Horror of It All, which looks like it cost whatever they found on the couch cushions to make and never quite got around to writing. The whole thing centered on a title song which Pat sings in a mad scientist's lab and a lot of wacky madcap haunted house style goings on, but I can't really recommend it, no. Maybe Tim Rosen as SurrealEstate's Luke Roman could show up and sell it for him, or burn it, maybe. Speaking of goofy, I decided to watch Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly's 2018 Holmes and Watson, based perhaps on names they heard someone say once. What I have to say about this movie is this, and it's not a spoiler because it should not have happened, but at one point, Queen Victoria herself, the royal she, greets these nitwits at 221B Baker Street, and while posing with them for a selfie, is knocked out, battered senseless, and is their monarch, with her royal guard standing outside in the hallway listening to this. Her limp and lifeless body is stuffed ignominiously into a steamer trunk. Which, now I've just got Will Ferrell high, screaming Leslie Nielsen's Naked Gun, tips a bump of cocaine onto John C. Reilly's ass from the exhumed and desecrated skull of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and snorts, "Hold my absinthe." Was it entertaining? Sure. Michael Bay production of Swan Lake would be entertaining. It's like the Family Guy version of The Great Gatsby. I mean, basically watch this because you're a fan of Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, not because you're a fan of Sherlock Holmes. In that case, save yourself the aggro and watch Hollywood's Macklemore-themed send-up of the Stephen Moffat-Benedict Cumberbatch reboot, which is itself slightly less fun than watching their Doctor Who doing the time warp. For Holmes and Watson, it exists, and that's sad. I saw more of American Horror Stories and American Horror Story Double Feature, which I'm for sure interested in seeing more, but my god, how many series does Murph need to be turning out all at once? Well, it gets a little self-referential, but from what I've seen, they're engaging, and at least it started out just fine. Otherwise, fall season starting up, I've not seen anything that grabs my attention. Ordinary Joe, maybe, but wow, tracking one guy through 3 timelines, that'd get tough to follow almost instantly. Pass. One thing that came up just as I closed out cataloging Disc 1200, I found the pilot episode of Warehouse 13 intriguing. When I've seen more, I'll share more. Closing out, new feature as of recently, but all my episodes are now available on YouTube. So along with my, as of this installment 6 VideoFuzzy video entries, you can now listen to all 77 episodes of VideoFuzzy on YouTube. And with that, thank you so much for checking on my video cataloging project. I did my 6th ever VideoFuzzy the video installment together for my Friday night feature for this one. That link is everywhere you'd think to look for it. You can check out my catalog listing with the audio links at videofuzzy.blogspot.com, and for past episodes, add, subscribe, or follow VideoFuzzy everywhere you get your podcasts. Feedback is always appreciated. You can contact me through my blog or podcast sites, via email, or through my VideoFuzzy page on Facebook, or you can follow me at TJVideoFuzzy on Twitter. For VideoFuzzy, I'm Terry J. Aman. Happy viewing.
It might be amazing, it might just be scuzzy. We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy.